Welcome, you're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. The G7 ambassadors group recognized the reform process that has been made in Ukraine since 2015. The group also identified the key Ukrainian reforms that they will support during the French presidency of the G7. To discuss this, we're joined in the studio today by Ivan Miklosh, chairman of the Strategic Advisory Group for Supporting Ukrainian Reforms. Hello, and thank you for being with us.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
So it's not a surprise that the process of implementing reforms started in Ukraine after the Euromaidan revolution happened. How many of the reforms are currently being implemented in Ukraine?
Yeah, firstly, I think that for the first time in Ukrainian history, now system is changing. If I'm speaking now after Euromaidan, during last 4 or 5 years, system is for the first time changing towards functioning market economy, rule of law economy. Still, it is a lot to do, but a lot of what once. Which means, what is success? Success is especially macroeconomic stabilization, where it was done a lot, not only in reduction of the deficit and debt, but also by introducing independent and professional central bank. In reducing and controlling inflation and stabilizing currency rate, in cleaning banking sector, which was for the first time done in Ukraine. Then some important structural reforms like pension reform, which was done, healthcare reform, which was started. First stage was done, education reform. Then very important, despite people usually not assess this such positively, fighting against corruption. In fighting against corruption, there are two main areas, or even three areas. True is that in punishment, it was not done so much. I mean, there are some changes. There is judicial reform, which was started. We have NABU, a new institution, investigation institution. We have a new anti-corruption court, which was passed the law and will be established. But still, in this area, there are not kind of significant results. But where there are results is reducing space for corruption. And this is important. It was really reduced space for big corruption. Firstly, by increasing of regulated price of gas, because regulated price of gas was one of the biggest sources of corruption. How it worked? Because the household tariffs have been very, very low. Gas was bought as on these tariffs as for household, but in reality it was sold to companies or to export on the much bigger price. Finally, it had to be paid by government because it increased deficit of Naftogaz. It was almost closed because gap is now much lower. Banking sector, banks, these banks which have been closed, and there are 90 banks which have been closed. All these banks served as ATM machines for owners of this bank. How it worked? They collected money from savers, people and companies, then gave the same money as credits to their companies or companies connected with them, owners of banks. Then these companies didn't return money to the bank, and savers had to be covered by a state guarantee fund, which means again from the public money, from the state money. This was also cleaned.
Okay.
Then VAT. VAT was a huge source of, refund VAT, which was connected to the bribes. Only then tax administration returned. Now we have this electronic system of VAT. Another area is public procurement, which was very big source of corruption. Now we have ProZorro system of electronic auctions, which means these areas really we can see significant positive results. Still, there are areas.
Yeah, which are, in your opinion, then, the areas where we're still kind of lagging behind?
Yeah, there are these kind of areas. If speaking about corruption, there is still state-owned companies. Ukraine has 3,500 state-owned companies, which is unbelievably big. And they are especially big companies. They are source of inefficiency and also corruption, also political corruption, also economic corruption. Then there are positive changes in tax administration partially, but there is not enough progress in customs, which still is a big source of corruption. Then, as I said, law enforcement and property right protection changes have been started, but still it is necessary to do much more. Then it is missing land market reform, which still is prohibited to sell land, which is very, very big obstacle for development, for investment, and it is anti-constitutional. It is against the rights of people. Then there are still a lot of progress is needed in energy sector. Some changes have been done in opening this sector. Independent regulator was established, but still sector is not open enough. Naftogaz, for instance, was very positive changes in corporate governance of Naftogaz, but still it was not finished unbundling, which is very important. And still, sector was not opened for investors, also for private and also for foreign investors to use this potential which Ukraine has. Which means, and I have mentioned the customs service, which is necessary to have much more. And then, in general, deregulation and improving business environment. Then public administration, which still is not effective enough. Which means you can see problems in every area, but the most important, in my opinion, will be sustain what was achieved, especially in macro stabilization and other areas, and to speeding up reforms in these 4 or 5 areas which I have mentioned: property right protection, law enforcement, privatization, land market, and so on. This is the key. If reforms will continue after this election year, then we can say that Ukraine has a real chance to really achieve high and sustainable economic growth, which will be possible then to see results of also for ordinary people by their salaries, quality of life, and everything connected with this.
Having said that, which time period are we talking about? Next 5 years, 10, 15?
Yeah, we are speaking about, let's say, by figures. Today, Ukraine is achieving growth around 3.5%. But last year, global growth was about 3.6%. And growth of Central European countries, for instance, my country, Slovakia, was around 4.5%. Which means still gap between Ukraine and Central European countries, for instance, is not closing. That's also illustrating that for Ukraine, it is not only necessary, but also achievable in case of doing reforms to have 6-7% growth, but not 1-2 year, but on sustainable basis. Which means if these preconditions are fulfilled, what I have mentioned, then we can expect that in 2-3 years from now, Ukraine can have this around 5-6-7% growth on sustainable basis. And
even though we're in a state of war.
Even though, because war is very, of course, tragic and unfortunate situation, but war is localized. Yeah, it is. Everybody knows that in majority, 95% of Ukrainian territory, there is no war and there is no uncertainty connected with.
Nevertheless, it does negatively affect the state of Ukrainian economy.
But despite of this, I think it is achievable, and I will tell you why. And we can speak about economic terminology, but very simple comparison. Ukraine was created 27 years ago. Slovakia 26 years ago. The economic level of Slovakia, Poland, and Ukraine at that time was the same or very, very similar. Yeah? Today, in purchase parity power, Poland and Slovakia has 4 times more GDP per capita, and in nominal, in dollars, we have more than 7 times more per capita. Which means, and at that time, 27, 26 years ago, I can say that not only our GDP was comparable, but also potential, Ukrainian potential was maybe even bigger than our potential. There was one analysis which was provided by Deutsche Bank in '92, and this analysis said that the most promising former Soviet Union country is Ukraine, because Ukraine had everything. Educated people, the best land in Europe, for that time, very developed industrial base. In Ukraine, there were produced planes and rockets and cosmic equipment. In Slovakia, not. In Poland, not, for instance.
Unfortunately, a lot has changed since 1992 in
Unfortunately, lack of 2 things. Lack of reforms and lack of EU integration. But now, when Ukraine is doing necessary reforms, uneasy, not such quickly as it could be, good or better, But now Ukraine is on this track, reform and EU integration track, which means to continue in this effort, in this direction, means that this gap in potential, this still, Ukraine has unused potential. And to use this potential, because people here are not different, there's no difference between Ukrainians and Slovaks or Poles.
Of course.
Only difference is that system, unreformed, corrupted and oligarchic system.
And the availability of opportunities.
Yeah, and this system is changing slowly. Not from it is difficult because these institutional roots of this system are very, very deep, and to change it is uneasy.
Well, hopefully we do change it. We will manage, and we will go through it and come out with as much success as is possible. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was Ivan Miklosh. He is a chairman of the Strategic Advisory Group for Supporting Ukrainian Reforms. Thank you so much for watching UATV. Stay tuned for more.